Hello. Today I received a yearbook from 2003 of the Encyclopedia Britannica, sold to me by the World of Books for this small sum, including postage, of £4.75, I think. Now, I do feel guilty at that because it really is, on examining the Encyclopedia Yearbook, also, it makes me believe more than I have been doing recently in the integrity of America and the United States. I believe that is partly what the Encyclopedia Britannica is voting for, to maintain some kind of standard of scholarship and integrity, and I'm very grateful for it. On the back, towards the back pages, that there was a sports section at the end, but towards the back pages, at the end of the world section, there was a photograph of a loaf of bread, which back in 2003 in Zimbabwe was changing hands for a whole wad of cash notes, which did amount to being very expensive for the people there. And I was struck by that photograph, and also remarkable in the light of how much the Encyclopedia Britannica Yearbook itself costs for me. I hope that I will be able to afford continued food supply, and that our culture and education will not get to suffer as it has been neutered and destroyed, that even the hope of it in some parts of Africa over the years, where people have struggled to afford basic supplies. There was also is also a whole section on water and predictions about freshwater pollution back in 2003 that are highly worrying. I will go on to talk about that perhaps sometime later. But I have to say now, because this is personal in a way, my daughter's dad, Chris Swainson, when he was at the University of York, we used to be very focused together on discussing some of the articles in New Scientist, and he was very interested in the explorations towards whether there's water on Mars, and it when I was young, I used to have a microscope and be very interested in science. It was only later on when a teacher of mine pointed out that there seemed to be a dichotomy encouraged between science and the arts, and that she didn't wish the arts and humanity and the humanities as well, which do cross the border between science and arts, to go out of focus, with everybody being hell-bent on science for its own sake. I was therefore very happy to discuss again with Chris, although he was worried about some aspects of science as well. I even used to listen to a podcast of New Scientist after the relationship, partly because it reminded me of the relationship, and partly because I was my interest was reignited. But sadly, a few years later, I remember the day when I was sitting in the gym round the corner. My dad had paid for me to be able to join the gym. It wasn't the one nearest to me now. I had to go. I don't frequent the gym anymore, but I used to go to the gym, partly because I was on some form of medication that was making me fat, but I found however much exercise I did, it didn't necessarily strengthen me because the medication was so strongly unstrengthening me. So I gave that up after a little while, a few years actually, but I was sitting in the gym cafe while my daughter was playing with, she was very sociable when she was little. I didn't outcast her to have to be sociable, but she was genuinely interested in making friends and approaching other toddlers, and she is still a lovely girl in my view. And I not only, well, it shouldn't only be in my view, she is a lovely girl, and I feel sorry though for some of the tribulations she's faced. She doesn't necessarily seem to have had many friends stick around once they found out that I was labelled with a mental illness, and that caused stigma for her and some form of distress. Anyway, just to return to the day in the gym when I was in the cafe and she was playing nicely with some a group of children in the gym crash. I was heart-stricken and very much saddened to learn that Laurel Clark, the astronaut, who had, I thought that, in retrospect, I thought I remembered that she was on a space shuttle called Challenger, and I thought she was the first female astronaut because certainly she was treated on the media as though she was very close to being the first female astronaut, and there had been interviews with her and a lot of fuss made about her joining the mission. And I was very pleased for a woman to have attained such a high level of forward-looking integrity, that she were, and her bravery as well. Really, I was impressed with her bravery as well. I did not want those circumstances for myself. I don't think I would necessarily be any good in space, but I was hopeful and definitely moved by the accounts before I heard sadly that after 15 or 16 days the shuttle had burned up on re-entry into the atmosphere, the Earth's atmosphere, and all the astronauts had been killed. And it was a dreadful moment hearing that on the radio in the gym cafe. I was so sorry for the young. She was still she was in the prime of her life, about 40 or something. Yeah, sad. But I was also struck to find just on the history website, that's the one with the sort of golden age, that's quite prevalent online. They didn't mention the experiments that had taken place while they were in orbit before In fact, they cut out that they made it out that the Columbia, it says it's called now. I thought it was the Challenger, but it says it's the Columbia in the Encyclopedia and online. Burst into flames. They have missed out the 15 days, which is sad because it's cut out her memory of her achievement. So I am peeved by that. I've noticed that there are some attempts to instate false memories in some people. I do believe that I was probably mistaken thinking it was called the Challenger and not the Columbia. But yeah, I think that purposely missing out the 15 days when the young woman had achieved her aim to some extent and was working in a field for which she had strived, is a shame to miss that out of the question. But also to say that in the Encyclopedia Britannica it mentioned that that was the first mission to not be backed financially by the state, but presumably to be privately backed by companies. Now, in one of the articles I read also surrounding Laurel Clark's personal biography in space, I learned about microgravity in particular. I knew about weightlessness in space, but I didn't know they called it microgravity. And I found out from NASA that on the International Space Station they're doing things like growing crystals and seeing how water behaves and things like that in conditions where gravity is reduced. I have a friend who has a continual nightmare that it might be like, what was it called, red dwarf on the International Space Station, and that they might be cooking up crystal meth or something. I really hope not, and certainly the Encyclopedia Britannica, although it is an old publication now, the yearbook has filled me with a sense of wonder and awe and respect for the publication.